With me, I've got Scott from Scotty B Cards. How you doing, Scott?
Good, Phil. How are you doing, man?
Doing awesome. By the way, Scott's got a really good channel. Check him out. I'll also put a link in the show notes as well to his channel. He puts up some really great stuff. And actually, we've done a few collabs. We did a little mock sports card portfolio 30-day contest with $100 worth of cards. So check out that series, and I'll actually link those videos in the show notes as well. So that was actually really fun. But the reason why I brought Scott on is because we're going to talk about something that's very timely. As you all are aware, the market has crashed, probably more appropriate term than dipped or softened. It's probably been a crash at this point. Across the board, we're seeing prices that have fallen upwards of 50 to 70% in some cases over the last 5 or 6 months. And this is certainly affecting baseball. This is certainly affecting the modern and ultra modern markets. Now, I want to preface this by saying that sometimes a crash isn't a terribly bad thing. Every market needs a crash to reset, to kind of flush itself, to bring its maybe prices back to equilibrium. But that is indeed what appears to be happening right now. And in today's video, there's been like this blanket narrative. And I want to give influencers and content creators a little bit of credit here, because not everybody is just saying plainly that base cards have crashed. But if you don't pay attention to the nuances, then that is kind of what the rhetoric seems like, that base cards crash. People are now not buying base cards anymore. They're never going to hold value. They're not investment cards. So we're going to dive into multiple different base cards. We're going to show some charts brought to you by Card Ladder. And we're going to talk about whether we think that the market maybe has overreacted, has it underreacted, has it properly reacted. With some of these cards, they might be slowly starting to hit some floors and start to bounce back up. Maybe there might be a little bit of support there.
First thing I'll say is we actually may have, at least I might have, a few differentiating points than Phil and some views, and that's good. It's good that you can get a couple different ideas, as well as a lot of the content creators out there are pushing a certain agenda, it feels like, for a certain reason, just because it gets a lot of clicks. So just because you hear somebody say something doesn't mean it's true. There's a lot of times for Phil, he could capitalize on a ton of views by saying the market's crashing with a face like that, and that's how it would work. So don't panic. First thing I want to say, we're going to show you some really cool stuff, but it's going to teach you how to be smart about your investments.
The first cards I'm going to bring up are going to be Zion Williamson's base rookie card and silver prism rookie card. So the base prism versus the silver prism. And you can see over the last 3 months that each are down. But in this rightmost column, you can see that the base card has fallen by about 40%, and the silver's fallen by about 34%. And the pops of these cards, got a lot on that base card, 18,000, 115, and just over 1,000 on the silver prism.
So the one thing I'll point out is, personally, I still think there's a really big spot for base cards in the market. You just have to be smart about buying it. Obviously, we're talking about Zion right now, but if you think of Luka, his stuff went to the moon, and all you ever heard is there's no way it could ever come down. If someone ever tells you there's no way it could ever come down, just know there's a guarantee it probably will come down. But overall, the thing I like to point out with these two cards, the base versus the silver, it feels like the ceiling of the sealer is exponentially higher than the base, simply because of the lower pop. Let's say Zion all of a sudden has a series or a season that's like people are speculating like they are in Luka right now. That silver will go up much faster than the base, and the base will follow as the silver rises, as they look at some sort of multiplier. But that's the good thing about the more rare cards. And that's nothing new that you've heard, but I still think there may be some value in those lower cards. You just need to make sure you're timing at the right time. 20,000 of a specific cards in a PSA 10 is a lot of cards. You can easily find one literally whenever you want. 1,200 is still high, but it's, literally 5% of the total pop, 1,000 versus 20,000. So just consider that as you're looking at it, and just know if you can afford a PSA 10 base, it may be worth getting a PSA 9 silver, just because of the strict print runs with them.
Yeah, and I agree with you that there is a place for base, I feel. I mean, taking this card off the table, I think that base cards are often an entry-level investment. They're often like sort of the gateway drug before you can get your feet wetter into maybe the more exclusive or higher end markets for somebody that's new to the hobby. It also provides a lot of liquidity. So we have to think about the reasons why we liked base cards a year ago. Why were they so popular other than Gary Vee talking about them? There had to have been other reasons, right? They're also, in many cases, the most recognizable cards. So this is what most people would consider the flagship brand, the equivalent, I guess the Topps equivalent, even though they're shiny and probably more expensive than Topps cards for baseball. This is the flagship brand for basketball. Prism's always going to have a place. There might be some other brands like Select that could gain momentum on Prism, but Prism's never going to change from what Prism is. And Prism's going to continue to outsell Optic in the near future, I would think, just because it's Prism. And silver prisms have their own place as well. And like you said, the pop of 1,000, not nearly enough to satiate everybody's needs. And that's why, you've seen the price trend a bit higher relatively versus the base, even in the midst of a crash.
Totally. And the point is, like you said, base cards do have a place in the hobby for good reason. I've actually bought some Mookie Betts base cards, and I've also bought some really high-end Mookie Betts cards. Here's an example of what I told Phil about. This is a pink out of 50 of his updates, a BGS 9. It's one of the highest, one of the rarest with really low graded cards that are high grades. And I also have a PSA 10 update that I recently bought because they've gone down so much. I guarantee you I could sell that update 10 for either the same or slightly under what I paid for it in a day, instead of waiting maybe a 6-month time frame to sell that pink. So I think there is the liquidity part that's really nice with base cards. And on top of that, the hobby isn't always about investing. Yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, that's what we want. We want all the cards we buy to go up because we're spending money on them. But when I started collecting, I was buying $5 to $10 cards as an investment and making a portfolio when I could back in 2015. You can get some cool stuff. But nowadays, people who just want to buy a Zion card, they're going to go with that base because it's affordable. So there's still going to be that place. It's never going to go much lower, in my opinion. It could always go lower, like I said, but there is going to be a floor eventually.
And you were talking about the collector. And I think we both kind of talked about the place for base for collectors. And we don't have definitive data that this is indeed happening, but one would think that a lot of the folks that got into the market in January are now leaving the market potentially.
Yeah.
And they are maybe recouping some of their money, probably taking losses, in some cases, very steep losses. And it's very difficult to put an entire group of people into one demographic because it's not that simple. Even with folks like me and you, we're not just a collector. We're not just an investor. We do a lot of stuff. We even flip cards, especially maybe I do that a little bit more than you. But if this truly was an exodus of the investor type that was in it for the money, then that would theoretically swing back some momentum. Just that factor in isolation would swing back some momentum in favor of collectors and base cards. Well, the next player we're going to show here is Ronald Acuna, and we've got his bat up US 250 Topps update rookie card and PSA 10, and that is down 40% over the last 3 months. We've got his bat down Acuna, a much more short printed card. Some people speculate that they printed around 10,000. Blowout will say 10,000 to 20,000. Some people say 5,000. I think it's probably closer to 10,000. That's down about 13%. And you've got his Bowman Chrome autograph and a PSA 10 with a pop of 102. And that is down just 12%. So here again, we're seeing that, and this is a lot more extreme, a lot more drastic, where the base card's really gotten hammered relative to the other two. What do you think about this, Scott?
Okay, so I am not a fan of what Topps has been doing recently with taking these really talented players and just ruining their rookie cards. And the reason I say that is they release, and Vlad's another example of this, Vlad's flagship is technically his update, even though no one cares about it, because he has the short print in Series 2, which isn't really short printed. It's probably, like you said, around 20 to 30,000 of them, which compared to the modern market is short printed. But they make two flagship images. It makes it so the traditional base, which is the update, just doesn't have as much value as the short print. These image variations are causing the same problem in my eyes. You know, you have with any player since probably 2014 with Mookie Betts, he has the smiling in the dugout card versus his base card with the same number on the back, which is a short print. It makes the base with a higher pop just not as desirable in my eyes, because if I was going to pick between how many bat downs? I mean, how many updates could I buy for the bat down? 10 of them? You know, I'd rather have one bat down than 10 of the updates, even though there may be a little bit higher ceiling. Long run, I think the bat down's going to be a better card, just because it is the true card in investors' eyes. So that's one thing I don't love about the base cards with Topps. I don't think Panini is doing as much with football and basketball, but with Topps, that's something that kind of worries me, actually.
Yeah, as years go on, they create more and more different competing image variations. So different images. We saw with Ohtani and Vlad, like you said, they were featured in different flagship products as rookie cards, as was Acuna. But at least here, his bat down was short printed a decent amount relative to Vlad the following year. And then you have competing cards from other brands. You know, you've got Topps Chrome Update. You've got Topps Heritage. There's a lot of brands when you really start to lay those out. You've got all the prospect cards, Bowman paper. You've got all the different autographs. And then there's like the tier 2 and tier 3 products, like the Bowman Platinums of the world, the Gypsy Queens. And it's really a lot. So I think, you know, there's really no magic number with like these cards. Like, oh, is it not an investor card because the PSA 10 pop is over 15,000? I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I think when we get to Juan Soto, that will kind of shed light on what exactly I'm talking about here. And I know, Scott, we talked about this earlier, that you're definitely in agreement. But when you're thinking about supply and demand, and if there's a place for that base card, it's difficult enough to kind of quantify that demand, looking at the player's hype, short-term expectations, the long-term outlook of that player. But when you look at that supply, it's not just the PSA 10 pop. Obviously, it's the PSA 10 projected pop, and how many you think will be graded within the next 1 to 5 years. And that can be difficult to estimate, but maybe you can somehow forecast some sort of a range. But there's also all of the competing rookie cards too, as well as that same card in other grades potentially. In Acuna's case, like you said, printed a hell of a lot of them. There's a hell of a lot of Acuna rookie cards. So it dropping 40% relative to these other cards doesn't really surprise me. I think that might be about right.
Yeah.
But I don't see it falling too much more. I mean, $122, that's pretty close to what it was like 18 months ago, before Gary V even pumped this card. So that's something to consider. Obviously, a lot of the spotlight has moved to Vlad, Ohtani, and I guess Wander Franco at this point. But here next, we've got Mookie Betts. So the first two cards were from 2019 and 2018, and PSA would classify those years as being ultra modern. That's how they've defined it, at least for those 2 years. This is 2014. This is Mookie Betts. And we've got his gold parallel PSA 10 and his base update card in a PSA 10. And the gold card's down 48%. The base card's down 55%. It's not that big of a move, though. And maybe one of the reasons why has to do with pop. And the pop on the gold, very, very low, 128. The pop on the base is 3,042. What do you think about this, Scott?
But if you look at the actual pop of 3,000, I would kind of use Mike Trout as the bench line. We know Mike Trout has about 5,000 to 5,500 PSA 10s. And if a player's underneath that and Mike Trout's still able to hold that much value, I think it's a good indicator that these players probably can as well. But once you have Acuna, Soto, Tatis hitting 20,000 PSA 10s, it makes it a little bit tougher to really see the ceiling for a specific card be $3,000 to $4,000 like Trout's PSA 10 was or is.
This one's interesting because, as you probably know if you've watched some of my videos, Scott, I like to focus on the multipliers of base to parallel and how they've changed over time. And this is a set where historically the gold would sell for in a PSA 10 right around like 4 to 5 times what the base would sell for. And you'd look at like more recent years, like 2019, and the multiplier would be like 10x on the gold. But that would make sense because the gold supply, print run and pop, that would stay relatively the same from year to year, theoretically. Whereas with the base card, they would continue to juice that. And sometimes it goes up. You know, one would presume that sometimes they increase print runs 30% or more each year from year over year. And that could definitely add up. So it kind of made sense. But as you can see here, the math's not there for you, but now the multiplier is about 8.5x from base to gold. So again, it started at about 4x. So that changed over the last year. So the market was saying that the gold was undervalued relative to the base, but so I think that might stick. I think that's fine because you've also seen the multipliers increase for more recent years. For like 2018, 2019, if you look at Soto and Tatis, it's probably no longer between 8 to 10x. It's probably closer to 15x.
Yeah,
off the top of my head on those cards. So maybe that's a new norm, but I still think that I think that this card right now might be a good buy, and I don't think that multiplier will shrink. So if this goes from 377 to 500, I don't think that the gold's necessarily going to increase that much more than 25%. So maybe I just think that they're both undervalued now, and properly valued relative to one another.
I think there's a lot of people who are kind of just panic selling a little bit too, which is helping that multiplier even more, because I think some of the people that are a little bit more in the hobby are targeting those golds, and they're willing to pay that multiplier because they still know it's rare and they can scoop up those base cards for so cheap.
All right, now we've got LeBron James. So this is his Topps Chrome rookie card. At the bottom, we've got his base card, a PSA 10. And then we've got his refractors above that. So we've got his refractor at a PSA 10, his refractor at a PSA 9. The one that has fallen the most is actually his refractor in a PSA 10. So everybody's saying that, buy parallels, buy rare stuff, don't buy base. Well, it looks like his base actually outperformed over the last 3 months. And to be fair, Gary Vee made a video, posted it probably about 10 days ago, but depending on when we actually upload this video. But he said, buy the PSA 10 Topps Chrome rookie card. So it probably came up by a couple thousand, and that probably made the difference. It probably would have been, the top card instead of the bottom card on this chart. But yeah, here's a situation where we have a population of 2,114 on that base card, and far fewer were the refractors, as little as 171 on that PSA 10 refractor. What do you think about this, Scott?
So there's certain cards like this LeBron that are hyped up so much that they eventually will have a mini. Like if you look at, for example, I don't know who showed it to me, but they showed me the History Jordan card in the PSA 10. It has literal true market ups and downs where it hits a peak, drops, hits a peak, drops, and it's going slightly up. This is one of those cards, but on top of that, it was pushed so much at one of the highest points ever in this history of the hobby that I still think the refractor is the better buy, and I still would have, in hindsight, it would have gone that route because of just the way history works. But there's a lot of market manipulation with all of these cards because they all are so low pop. 2,000 is not that high, especially considering where the price was before the big boom. A lot of people had a really big position in those, and so it was easy to manipulate it higher and higher. So I think this was one of the few cards that truly was manipulated.
Yeah, I was looking at another chart, and I believe that the base PSA 10 has fallen about 70%, or at least at the low point, maybe whether it was last week or the week before, it had fallen almost 70% from highs, maybe a little bit more, maybe about 73% from highs. So yeah, definitely a little bit of manipulation there. But at the same time, this is a card that I consider I think people universally considered his staple rookie card, his top and most identifiable rookie card. I think that definitely holds some merit. And also here it's a little tricky because now we're comparing a PSA 10 base card to a PSA 9 refractor. And there could be a lot of weight to the PSA 10 versus a PSA 9, as we saw last year. And this is probably part of the reason why, okay, let's take this back a year. We know how well PSA 10s did last year versus PSA 9s. Well, here you can see the PSA 10s killed this PSA 9 refractor last year. And a lot of that could be new people entering the hobby and not knowing better and going for the gray that's held to the most esteem at the current time, the one that everybody's pumping inadvertently or not on their social media outlets, YouTube channels, etc. But some of it might actually be important, especially if you're bullish on PSA. So this is kind of like a long-term bet. What's the true power of PSA? We knew the true power of PSA was a lot last year, speaking about the 10. But what's going to happen over the next 10 years? And you have to think about, maybe other grading companies and maybe just people adapting and being more okay with the lower graded cards. But I think that there is an important point to make in that when you talk about scarcity, there's really two types of scarcity. There's scarcity of the card, the intrinsic scarcity, and then there's grading or condition related scarcity. So both of those kind of matter. With 86 Flair Jordan, that clearly does matter. A card that was printed a lot. Next up, we've got Juan Soto, and we've got 3 different cards of his. We've got his a little bit different. His Bowman's Best Refractor in a PSA 10. His Topps Update US 300 PSA 10, and his Bowman Chrome Prospect Autograph card from 2016 in a PSA 10. And here they're all kind of close. They're all kind of neck and neck. They've all fallen between 54.96 to about 57%. So what do you think? What do you think about this, Scott?
I think this is just an example of a player not living to his expectations of where he did last year, honestly, and that's why you see even drops across the board, for me at least. Man, amplify that with the falling market, but that's why I think a lot of the numbers are similar. It's just because people overall just aren't as high on him as they were.
Yeah, and I know we talked about this beforehand, but potentially one of the reasons why maybe his Topps Update card is held up pretty well is because of the timing of when he debuted. He wasn't able to make it in as many products. Because of that, he's got far fewer rookie cards and like total that were printed, which definitely helps. So, and it actually, if you look at the most recent price, 142, we were looking at Acuna earlier from the same product. He was at 120. But it's just interesting here that despite Soto's struggles and despite Acuna tearing it up, that Soto is actually selling for a little bit more. I would argue that a lot of this is just based on his available rookie card. So again, going back to supply and not just this one card. This has a pop of 17,500. The Acuna was pretty close, I think in the 18s or 19s. So I would argue that the difference in price is actually because Soto has fewer rookie cards overall, and it's not related to any performance difference or people preferring him over Acuna right now, and it's not due to the pop of these respective cards.
No, I totally agree. And if you actually consider it, we're comparing a Bowman's Best card to his flagship just because he's in so few products. He has Topps Chrome Update. But other than that, he's only another like 1 or 2 Chromium sets that are licensed. Even his 2016 Bowman Chrome Autograph, he doesn't have a 2016 Bowman First. And so there's just not as many options with Soto, which does help with his values. And I wish that was the case with more players. It is the case with DeGrom, Betts, Trout. A lot of players made their debut later in the year, and Topps is eliminating that from the players now, like Wander Franco, who's in June. They're going to keep him out until 2022, which will have 30 products like Acuna did. So I think players like this, they have an inherent advantage just because they have less cards to target.
Yeah, you brought up Wander Franco. That makes me think of something that I was thinking about earlier. At some point, we might have 2 ultra-modern eras. We might have an ultra-modern and an ultra-ultra-modern. And maybe, and I'm just making this up, maybe one of them is between 2018 and 2019, and the next one's like 2020 moving forward.
Yeah.
Because at the rate that they've increased print runs, and it could slow down because the market slowed down, and overall market aggregate demand has slowed down. So that would, in theory, make them probably be less incentivized to create more. But if the market keeps on growing steadily, then it will be interesting to see, like, what do 2022 and 2023's print runs, what will those look like versus 2018? Will like Acuna's base card look like it wasn't printed that much? Will the pop actually look relatively modest or even low? Well, I doubt low, but at some point, maybe in 10 years, it'll look low. But it's just interesting to compare time periods.
Speaking of that, I don't think, like, yes, we're in a down market in comparison to where we were 6 months ago, but since 2 years ago, we are up so high. And if you try to find any retail still, people still want it, and they're going to keep printing it, even though they always claim they understand what they did the junk wax era, they're not going to do it again. They're going to keep printing it. And so I think there actually is a real potential in what you're saying.
You mentioned the Bowman's Best, and there's clearly not a lot of them at 522. This is an example of where maybe I think it's undercorrected, this card. And if you look at the last year, the Bowman's Best PSA 10 has outperformed the Bowman Chrome autograph and the flagship card in a PSA 10. And I think that might be a little bit of a mistake. And this is more of an opinion than anything. I just think that there are certain brands, there's not going to be enough room for them in the player's market. Maybe now there is, but 5 to 10 years, maybe with Soto, maybe he's an example where there will be a room for this card, but there's just so many brands, and there's a lot of brands that aren't investment brands. This one's kind of stuck between because it's not as Bowman's Best isn't as bad as Bowman Platinum. People like to rip it. People love the on-card autographs, but it's still Bowman's Best.
Yeah,
I know it's a refractor, but it's still Bowman's Best. And even though it does have a pop of 500, I don't know if I'm buying that at 135. That's just my opinion, and it's a nice looking card. Fernando Tatis Jr. We've got his Topps Chrome refractor up top. We then have his base paper card from Series 2. We've then got his gold parallel from Series 2, a Bowman Chrome rookie, a little bit different, and then a Bowman Chrome autograph is leading the charge, being up 13%. The other cards are down between 11 and 33%.
Tatis, he's awesome. One thing I do like about Tatis rookie cards across the board versus other players is you can see that same flagship image in almost every product. You could even put Sapphire up there and everything. And he doesn't have any image variations in any of his sets, not even an update from that year. So I think that also gives him an advantage to have that refractor be worth more than other players' refractors. Like if you look at Ronald Acuna, his Topps Chrome refractor or Topps Chrome image itself doesn't match anything. It doesn't match any. Same with this Topps Chrome update. It's a different image than anything else. So I think that's actually an advantage that Tatis carries. And I hope Topps does more of that and less of the short print stuff and ruining players' rookie cards. So that's not in regards to the price points. The price points, I think it's kind of weird that Tatis is even down with how well he's playing. Maybe it's just because the market was so hot, it's just cooling off across the board. But that's just something to look at.
Yeah, so with Tatis, with the refractor performing the best, this is one of the issues with picking like arbitrary points where we measure this data being 3 months. Maybe we go back a little bit further. It tells quite a bit of a different story. And if you go back 6 months, you see that the PSA 10 refractor actually outperformed all the other ones by a lot. So even though it's one of the biggest movers downwards over the last 3 months, it actually did really well over the last 6. So this is an area of overcorrection, maybe for this one particular card, maybe for refractors across the board. Maybe people just went to refractor crazy over the last 6 months, over the last year. This could have been caused by people coming over from other sports that really like the look of Chrome products. Perhaps one of the reasons why Bowman's done so well too over the last 6 months. They saw that the Topps Chrome refractor and perhaps the Bowman Chrome colors were the closest things to the prism parallels that they liked from basketball, from football. But another thing I take from this is that, again, if we go back to those last 3 months, I don't think that refractors overcorrected too much for another reason, and it's because I don't think we should think of things in absolute terms. I don't think we can say that all base cards are bad, and I think we've already done a good job refuting that. But we also can't say that all parallels are good and all refractors are good, even if they are short printed. And there are some from more recent years where there's a lot of competition in that grade, in that product with other parallels, other variants, other products, other grades of other products. You have to look at the population in aggregate, and that's how you paint the supply story. And as we noted with the short prints, they're printing more and more each year. Well, they're printing more and more of all the non-numbered parallels from Topps Chrome each year. The sepias, the pinks, the negatives, the X-fractors, the prisms. Why would they not? One of the reasons why, in addition to the time and scale and cost it takes to put the number on the back of a card for each card, one of the reasons why they decide to not number certain parallels is because it gives them more flexibility years to come. So when people open up that product, they don't get completely skunked.
Think about basketball for a sec. From 2007 Topps Chrome, we look at Kevin Durant. That refractor of his rookie has 1499. And that's from a product that hardly had any printing on it. There's a real chance that these are going to go way higher. These are probably already at 5,000 plus of the refractors, and it's not going to slow down. So I agree with you. And make sure, the one thing I want to say is just make sure you do your research independently on each card and each player, because one thing that's true for Tatis will not be true for Soto.
All right, one of the last things I wanted to bring up, just to provide a little bit extra context and to end on a positive note, if you go back over the last 4 or 5 years and you look at all of these dips that have happened, and you might look at this most recent one and scream that it's the most severe dip and it's been the most painful and destructive for the people in the hobby. Most of the cards that we've shown today are actually still well above where they're at a year and a half ago. And one might think, looking at these charts, that for all of these lows that are established, that's just a new floor in order to find higher highs. So look at a card as simple as 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. If the historic trends are to stay the same, we're going to see higher prices than the highs that we saw months ago, just based on that pattern. And that is it for today's episode. Basically, the summary message is don't overreact, and not all base cards are bad, but at the same time, not all parallels are good in some cases.
Thanks, Bill. I will also just say we're kind of getting back to a normal sports card market. This is how things have usually worked. It feels scary because of where we were. You could have bought anything and made money, and now you're going to have to be smarter and be smarter than another person. And if you do, you're going to make money still. But we're in a good spot. And Phil, thanks for having me on. Love the channel, man. It's kind of fun to be on here with you.
You too, man. Take care.